Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a master's student in computer science at Virginia Tech, and today I'm going to talk about steganography, referencing the paper Cyber Warfare, Steganography versus Stegoanalysis. Just to give you an idea of what this means, steganography is the practice of concealing messages or information with other non-secret text or data. So stegoanalysis is the study of detecting messages hidden using steganography. I chose this paper because I'm interested in Cicada 3301. It's an internet puzzle of sorts where a secret organization uses steganography to hide clues for something we haven't really figured out yet. See, some of the world's best stegoanalysts are still stuck on some of the most difficult steganographic puzzles made by this mysterious group. But in order to understand where we are now, let's start at the beginning. On January 4th, 2012, users browsing 4chan's paranormal board X were met with the following image. Hello, we are looking for highly intelligent individuals. To find them, we have devised a test. There is a message hidden in this image. Find it, and it will lead you on the road to finding us. We look forward to meeting the few that will make it all the way through. Good luck, 3301. And so, this introduces our first level of steganography, using digital media content to embed the message. So solvers downloaded this image and opened it in a text editing software to examine the bytes. Scrolling down the hash dump of the image file, they found the following text. Tiberius Claudius Caesar says, and then some random characters following it. But this does give us a hint since he's famous in cryptography for popularizing the Caesar cipher. So in this case, it was a ROT4 variation using the complete ASCII table of symbols. So we used an online decoder tool and we uncover a link. When we follow it, we get our next clue, which is a picture of a duck. So puzzle solvers with a background in steganography could probably discern from this image the hidden clue it was suggesting. Reading it through, it says, whoops, just decoys this way. Looks like you can't guess how to get the message out. And this gives us our next clue. If you've ever heard of steganographic software, it's known as outguess. And so, unlike the last clue, which had an obvious reference to a Caesar cipher, this clue was following much better stenography, where, according to the paper I'll keep referencing, the crucial requirement for steganography is perceptual and algorithmic undetectability. So outguess works specifically by using a discrete cosine transformation, and it discerns different blocks of similar color pixels by a point or two that the human eye would not normally be able to detect, and it uses that to extract the data. So let's run the code in outguess on the command line, and this gives us this text output. Here's a book code to find the book and more information, and then we go to this subreddit, and then here's the random seeming book code. So going to the subreddit, we see a bunch of random posts, but sorting through it, we get two pictures. The earliest being this image saying welcome, and when we outguess it, this image gives us a PGP message. So this part is vitally important to the rest of the puzzle because from now on, Cicada will only communicate with the PGP verified message. So if you're not familiar with PGP, it's a form of encryption developed at MIT that stands for pretty good privacy. And without getting too in depth, you can think of it like someone using a custom wax stamp to seal a letter. And so using GPG, you can verify that the letter from the sender is legitimate and hasn't been tampered with, so you can prove its authenticity. The next image shows some obvious repetition and distortion. In steganography, this is called a stereogram. And when you use outguess this image, you get this message. This in itself is a hint because instead of looking through the posts, let's just look at the subreddit, specifically the cover image at the top. Now this part gets a little confusing, so I'll have a video by Nox Populi playing in the background, but to explain it briefly, the top cover photo is Mayan numerals, which correspond to the name of the subreddit, so A would equal 10 and E would equal 14, and those shift like a Caesar cipher would. But now we're going to do it with each letter. So as we go through deciphering each post, we get to the text for a book, which then we can apply the book code that we got earlier. So the first number being the line and the second number being the character when we apply the book code. Once we finish decrypting using the book code we got on the text, everything gets a bit more real because then we get this message. Call us at the telephone number 214-390-608. And this is the voicemail we get.
Very good. You have done well. There are 3 prime numbers associated with the original final .jpeg image. 3301 is one of them. You will have to find the other 2. Multiply all 3 of these numbers together and add a .com on the end to find the next step. Good luck. Goodbye.
The people working on solving the puzzle eventually figured out that the dimensions of the original image were both prime numbers and when multiplied with 3301 equaled 845.145.127. And when entering this into a web address bar, it brought them to a site with an image of a cicada and a countdown. Once the countdown reached 0, the page updated with a list of coordinates in 14 different countries all across the globe. At these locations, people would soon discover a piece of paper taped up somewhere in public with a QR code and a picture of a cicada.
Howdy folks, this one was just outside the subway here, exit 1, on the bike shelter over here. So I got it right there. Oh, it was taped. You can see the corners. I was excited, I just kind of ripped it off. It's taped right there, so yeah, heading home. Later.
Upon scanning the QR code, 1 or 2 different messages were revealed. For this video, we'll use the second one, which contains a description of a book and another book code, along with a warning about too much collaboration amongst puzzle solvers. The description states, a poem of fading death, named for a king meant to be read only once and vanish. Alas, it could not remain unseen. Eventually, solvers figured out the description referenced the poem Agrippa, an art piece where an autobiography stored on a floppy disk would encrypt itself after its first use. But anyways, using the book code with the poem leads to a .onion website. For those unfamiliar, .onion websites are generally associated with the dark web, but are really a special domain suffix that use an anonymous hidden service that's reachable on the browser that uses an appropriate proxy, like the Tor network. So I booted up Tor because I was just curious to see if the site was still up, but it wasn't, so I have the .text file with the GPG signature removed for you. And essentially what this message says is that the first few who arrive to the site would receive an email in a few days with one last clue to the puzzle. So eventually the finalists received an email and it had a RSA encryption, which is just a specific algorithm for encryption in digital signatures, and each one had a specific end value. And so when they appended it to the Onion link earlier, it gave them a MIDI puzzle, and a MIDI puzzle, just to put it simply, is another substitution cipher where each tone in the MIDI is a specific letter. So after solving the puzzle, the finalists received a message asking them to contact Cicada, and at this point, this is when a lot of the 2012 puzzle solvers went dark, and a month later, we were just left with this one final message. But fortunately, this wasn't the end of Cicada, and it would be about another year before they would pop up again. So on January 5th, 2013, this image was posted to the export on 4chan again, this time saying that the first clue to this year's puzzle was also hidden inside the image. So just like last year, the image had hidden text added to it steganographically using a software called Outguess. Its output displayed another riddle about a book and a book code to go along with it. The riddle states, "Welcome again. Here is a book code. To find the book, break the riddle. A book whose study is forbidden, once dictated to a beast, to be read once and then destroyed, or you shall have no peace." So solving this riddle was a bit easier for puzzle solvers this time, since going with Cicada's theme, it was soon discerned that the book in question was called The Book of the Law, Liber Alveligis, by Lester Crowley, the famous English occultist. And this makes sense since Crowley said the book was dictated to him and its purpose was to read it once and then burn it as to not follow it to the letter. Anyways, moving on and following through with the book code, we deciphered it and it led to a Dropbox link. While the link is no longer up, I do have access to the original ISO file, and so when we boot it up in VirtualBox, we get this output. And after progressing all the way to 3301, the OS ends with this message. Solvers were pretty easily able to figure out that the @ symbol is associated with Twitter, and it led them to the account following it. And once they got to the account, they saw a bunch of posts, and running a simple script to extract all the posts, you could see that it resulted in data typical of a hex dump, but with no more information to go on, it seemed kind of like a dead end, so I think we should investigate the ISO further. So interrupting the boot sequence, you can see that it goes into a small Linux installation called TinyCore. Guessing the default username as TC and there's no password, we're able to look through the files and see that besides the script to print the prime numbers and restart the boot sequence, we also see a .mp3 file titled 761, which I'll start playing now, and if you notice, it was the song playing in the beginning of this video. So examining the MP3 file closer, we can look at the metadata of the file using ID3 tags in Ubuntu, and we can get out this statement. Like the instar tunneling to the surface, we must shed our own circumferences, find the divinity within, and emerge. Now that doesn't offer much help, and solvers were stuck here for a few days, but luckily the Twitter profile mentioned earlier made a post. So taking this post not really literally, we can see that it's giving us some advice to start at the beginning and to skip nothing. So solvers went back to the Twitter data. So if we assume that the Twitter data was in hexadecimals so Twitter could consume it, then if we use XXD, we could convert it back to binary format. So basically combining what we have, puzzle solvers eventually XORed the 761 MP3 file with the data dump on Twitter, and that resulted in the following JPEG file, which was pre-constructed from the tweets. So the image was titled the Gematria Primus, and a Gematria is a type of cipher where letters are assigned numbers to hide the different values. In this case, it was using Anglo-Saxon runes. It was soon discovered that this image also used Cicada's favorite steganographic technique, so outguessing the image produced this seemingly empty message. But at least it was PGP signed, just to show that it was made on purpose. So now on closer inspection of the message, we could see that it was full of tabs and spaces, so a space equaling 1 blank space and tabs equaling 4. So once we converted it to binary, we could use ASCII table to make it a bit more legible, and solvers found this message. And so we have another onion link, and solvers booted up Tor and went back onto the deep web, where they were greeted with this image. And so if you look at the image, it says that web browsers are useless, and so puzzle solvers figured out that you're going to have to telnet into the website, and once you did, you were shown an interactive shell. So interacting with this shell, there were a variety of commands that would give some clues that would be useful even for future years. So the first clue is when you type in prime, it gives us a list counting up to 3301, but if you notice that the primes between 71 and 1229 are missing, and this seemed pretty useless at the time, but it could be a possible clue to the current puzzle. So another really interesting part is when you type in a string, it uses the Gematria Primus mentioned earlier and translates it into its numerical value associated with that. And so the char's numbers in the instar emergence would be totaled to 761, hence the name 761.mp3. So typing hint or get clue gave us what looked like a hex dump, but this didn't produce anything readable when we converted to ASCII. However, XORing the hex with the data file from the ISO mentioned earlier gave us this mysterious message. You can't see the forest when you're looking at the trees. And this doesn't seem entirely useful, but it's something. So now typing hello or get 3301 would give the following. And when we use the hex to ASCII converter on this, we get a message saying this: very good, you have done well to come this far. And then it's followed by another onion link. So following the onion link led to this web page with the message and when we examined the source of the page, it gave us a very literal message to just wait. And so, just as a side note, puzzle solvers weren't eager to just sit around, so they started to dig deeper on the site, and this is one of the only aspects of Cicada allegedly making a mistake. And so when you attempt to telnet into this onion link, just like the previous one, you were given an error, but it provided a VPS on which the site was hosted. This turned out to be a rented server in Tokyo, but unfortunately any attempt to figure out who rented the server hasn't yielded any results, and eventually on the discovery of this, the site was taken down. So a few days later, the site came back on and it had the message, "You already have everything you need to continue. Sometimes one must knock on the sky and listen to the sound. Good luck." So solvers took the hint and pinged the website's IP address, and each time they pinged it, it gave some data back, and eventually it led to the following message: "Well done, you have come far," and then along with another onion link. And while it's getting a bit repetitive, just like the first puzzle, this onion link led to a list of coordinates to areas around the globe, and just like the first puzzle again, the solvers would find a piece of paper with a cicada, but this time it had a phone number and an access code. When you called the phone number, there was automated speech requesting an access code, and this was the code on the piece of paper that, after being geometrified in the second onion link, it was able to find the next clue. So the clue for each person recovering the piece of paper when they called the number was some data that they copied down, and when they XOR'd this with another data file in the ISO earlier, it gave each person another onion link. So on each link there was an SSSS code, or Shamir's secret sharing scheme, which was developed by the co-creator of the RSA encryption talked about earlier. And this works essentially by splitting up the password to a message into a certain number of pieces that when they're reconnected, the password will be revealed and then you're able to get to the message. So in this case, there were 10 pieces, but you only needed to reconnect 5 in order to see the message. And so in this case, it was the 5th and final onion link. And this was a timed test for the few finalists that were actually left. The site's no longer up, so I can just scroll through an Inger album on the questions that they were asked, and you can pause to read through them if you'd like. So after finishing the test, the finalists put in an anonymous email address, and a few days later they received this email. Essentially, it was asking them to make a TCP server on Tor with an interactable shell similar to the ones the solvers interacted with before. So once the finalists completed their servers and turned them in by the deadline, about 2 weeks had passed, and then eventually they were pinged with the following log. Unfortunately, after this, the puzzle goes dark, and while some said that they received an email similar to that of the 2012 finalists, this can't be confirmed since we don't have any verifiable links. And while this puzzle seemed to just fizzle out, many of the things discussed in this 2013 puzzle will come into play in the last and current puzzle. On January 6, 2014, the Twitter account associated with 3301 linked to this Imgur image. Similar to earlier rounds of the puzzle, the image contained a steganographically hidden message that we recovered with outguess, giving us this message. Similar to the last 2 years, it was a riddle in a book code. In this case, the book was The Self-Reliance and Other Essays by Ralph Waldo Emerson, giving us another onion link. Just like the past puzzles, these onion links have gone offline, so I'm going to be forced to explain what happened using current resources that are available to me. So once solvers arrived at the link, they found a collage of 4 paintings by William Blake. Here I have the original image file, and running outguess on it, we get this RSA encryption. Just like the last RSA encryption, we get both E and N, which makes up the public key. And in order to crack the encryption, we need to calculate the private key. This is found by finding the 2 prime values that make up N. So since the specific RSA was only RSA 130, unlike modern standards which use RSA 2048, after a few hours of running code, solvers were able to find the P and Q values, which are the variable names for the 2 prime numbers that make up N. Next, solvers identified that the use of double colons was from Perl, And so using the downloaded crypt API, we generate the private key using the 3 variables P, Q, and N, just like Cicada used to encrypt it. And now running the encrypted message using the Perl script, we get led to this onion link. Here we get a massive 3 megabyte text file, and following the pattern of the previous puzzle, the file gets converted back to binary using XXD. So after we did this, I discovered that the file contained 3 JPEG images, but the bits were in reverse order, so we had to use unpack and pack from Perl to bit flip the images. And so now finally, examining the file, we see the 3 mysterious images and our first exposure to the crux of Steganalysis today, the Liber Primus. As of now, the puzzle solving becomes a lot less linear, so let's focus on this page first. So here we see a bunch of runes, and if we remember back to the 2013 puzzle with the Gematria Primus, we can translate these runes to this. Now this took puzzle solvers a while to figure out how to solve, but using a column transition cipher and applying it to each rune individually, we get this message. Meanwhile, another solver working on the 3 pages XORed the hexadecimal messages hidden within each of the 3 images to get this output. And then collaborating with the other solver, they used the same column transition cipher to get this message. So it looks like we're off to another link. When the visitors arrived, it took a while before one solver ran Dirbuster to look at the backend Apache server, and they discovered it was leaking a system status page, where appended to the end of the page was a string containing 2 images with some out-of-bounds data between the 2. So XXDing the first image, we're able to find where the bytes end, and then we reverse the string and XXD again to find where the bytes for the second image end, so then we can identify the exact bytes for the start and end points of the OOB data. Now just like other times, we convert the OOB data to binary and reverse it, and we get this magic square sequence. After that, solvers didn't hear much from Cicada, but a few days later, the Apache server status page changed again to display a new hexadecimal string containing 2 images found in the same style as before. After some time, solvers discovered the use of a Veneris cipher and decoded the following pages to this. Then using this same method, the Veneris offsets were applied to the outguessed JPEG image from the first page, which gave us another onion link. Following this link, we find a string beginning with bytes indicating a gzip file, so unzipping it, we get 4 additional pages. One was solved using the substitution cipher, and the other had a key and outguess that was solved using the columnar transposition cipher, and then once these solved, produced a string with another link. This time at the link, we find a song called Interconnectedness, which has been playing in the background, and after a little bit, the site goes offline and online again with a different image. The image was a painting, and when we subimpose it, we get 2 columns of numbers. Again, applying outguess to the image, we get a bzip file with a few files. This file contained a message with a book code, and to not get into too much detail since it's really getting complicated now, the book code was The Eternal Golden Braid by Douglas Hofstadter, and now applying the code to the book, we get one final link. At this link, finalists found another hex dump with 4 new pages, but this time they weren't in reverse order and none of the JPEG pages were encrypted either. Outguessing each image held the same message with a reference to the magic square mentioned earlier, and it had this message. And just like the last site, it goes down and back up, looking for the submissions in the onion address to contact the finalists. And after the submission, solvers were rewarded with 3 more pages with their translations here. And after this final submission, just like the last few puzzles, nothing came about for a few weeks, till eventually finalists were contacted. But unlike 2012 and 2013, there's no final questionnaire this time. It's just the rest of the 58 pages of the Liber Primus, with 74 in total now, and only 19 translated. So with this massive Librum left to solve, 2014 passed, and when 2015 came and went, Steganalists believed that the Liber Primus was the key to getting the next clue from Cicada. This was confirmed in 2016, with this hint encouraging the re-examination of the book. But now it's been 5 years with complete silence from Cicada and minimal progress through the book. Questions left unanswered: who is Cicada, what was the point of all this, and what happens when you reach the end? While there is no confirmed answer from 3301, we do have some. One of the 2012 finalists was a student who went to Virginia Tech. In an interview with Nox Populi, the creator who I've been using their videos for when I don't have access to Tor, who is also a finalist from 2013, discussed the tasks they had after joining the organization. where he was assigned to create a cybersecurity related program for the greater good, and it aligned with the questions from the email the finalists had to answer in the first puzzle. But beyond that, he wasn't exposed to any more answers than we were. In my personal opinion, I believe they're just a loosely knit group of hobby steganographers communicating on the Tor network to recruit more people. At least this would explain the flakiness of the group despite their core mission. But yeah, anyways, I'd like to thank you for watching my video. It's been a passion project of mine for a while now, and I hope I've sparked some interest in internet mysteries for you. Thanks, and have a good one.